The sunlight streaming through the airplane windows looked warm and forgiving, but for Armin Qureshi, it felt like a spotlight exposing everything he had tried so hard to hide: his worn-out shoes, his wrinkled shirt, and the quiet exhaustion etched deep into his face. As passengers settled into their seats with casual confidence, he clutched his boarding pass like it was the last fragile thread holding his dignity together. Just as he began to breathe, a uniformed pilot paused beside him, glanced at his seat number, and made a polite yet firm request that would unravel everything. Before the story continues, if you believe that kindness can change lives and that second chances matter, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Tales. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Armin had boarded early, not out of privilege but necessity. Traveling with his 6-year-old daughter, Meher, meant he needed time to settle her nerves, time to tuck away their modest belongings, and time to prepare himself for the stares he knew would come. Meher clung to him, her small hand wrapped tightly around his fingers, her eyes wide with both curiosity and fear. It was her first time on a plane, and though Armin tried to make it sound like an adventure, deep down he knew this journey was more about survival than excitement. He had chosen that seat carefully, saving for months just to afford a ticket that wouldn't require them to sit apart. Every rupee had been counted, every unnecessary expense sacrificed. Life hadn't been kind to him since his wife passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Meher alone. He had worked odd jobs, endured sleepless nights, and swallowed his pride more times than he could remember. But today was supposed to be different. Today, he was taking Meher to a new city, a fresh start, a chance to rebuild everything that had fallen apart. As the cabin filled with passengers dressed in crisp suits and designer outfits, Armin felt smaller with each passing moment. He noticed the subtle glances, the quiet judgments masked behind polite smiles. He was used to it by now. Society had a way of measuring worth through appearances, and he knew he didn't fit the picture. Then came the moment. The pilot approached with a composed expression, his voice calm but authoritative. He explained that there had been a seating issue and requested that Armin move to another seat further back. It sounded simple, almost routine, but the implication was clear. This seat, the one Armin had worked so hard to secure, was no longer meant for him. Armin hesitated, his grip tightening around Meher's hand. He looked at her, her hopeful eyes searching his face for reassurance. He forced a gentle smile, masking the storm within him. He didn't argue. He didn't question. He simply nodded, because life had taught him that sometimes, dignity meant walking away without a fight. As he gathered his small bag and prepared to move, a wave of whispers spread through nearby passengers. Some watched with curiosity, others with quiet approval, as if the world had just been set right again. Armin felt the weight of those silent judgments pressing down on him, but he kept his head low and his steps steady. The walk to the back of the plane felt longer than it should have. Each step echoed with memories of past humiliations, of doors closed before he could even knock, of opportunities lost because he didn't look the part. Meher stumbled slightly, and he quickly steadied her, whispering reassurance that everything was okay. But it wasn't. As they reached the last row, something unexpected happened. A flight attendant hurried toward the pilot, her expression shifting from routine professionalism to visible concern. She spoke in hushed tones, but the urgency in her voice was impossible to miss. The pilot's confident demeanor faltered, his eyes narrowing as he listened. Armin didn't pay much attention at first. He was too focused on settling Meher into the cramped seat, too busy convincing her that this was just as good as the front. He smoothed her hair, adjusted her seatbelt, and gave her a reassuring nod. Meanwhile, the atmosphere near the front of the cabin had begun to change. The pilot turned, his gaze scanning the rows until it landed on Armin. For a brief moment, confusion flickered across his face, followed by something else, something heavier, more unsettling. He walked back, each step slower than before, as if weighed down by a realization he hadn't expected. Passengers noticed. Conversations paused. Eyes followed him. When he finally reached Armin, the silence in that section of the plane felt almost suffocating. The pilot cleared his throat, his earlier confidence replaced by a careful, measured tone. He addressed Armin again, but this time there was a noticeable shift in his posture, in the way he held himself. Armin looked up, surprised. He wasn't used to second chances. The pilot explained that there had been a misunderstanding. The seat Armin had been asked to leave wasn't just any seat. It was reserved for someone of great importance, someone whose presence on the flight carried significant weight. But now, it seemed, there had been an error in identifying that person. Armin listened quietly, his expression unreadable. The truth, when it surfaced, was almost unbelievable. Armin Qureshi wasn't just a struggling single father. He was the unseen owner of the very airline he was sitting in. Years ago, before tragedy reshaped his life, he had built an empire from nothing. His company had grown quietly, strategically, until it became a major force in the aviation industry. But after his wife's death, he had stepped away from the spotlight, choosing anonymity over recognition, simplicity over luxury. He had boarded that plane not as a billionaire, but as a father trying to give his daughter a better life. The pilot's face reflected the gravity of his mistake. He had judged a man based on appearances, unaware that he stood before the very person who had given him his career. A ripple of realization moved through the cabin. The same passengers who had watched Armin walk to the back now looked at him with a mix of shock and discomfort. The narrative had shifted, but the weight of what had happened remained. Armin took a deep breath, his eyes meeting the pilot's. There was no anger in his gaze, no desire for confrontation. Just a quiet understanding of how the world worked. He stood slowly, holding Meher's hand, and walked back toward the front. This time, the path felt different. Not because of who he was, but because of what had been revealed. As he reached his original seat, he paused for a moment, looking out the window at the bright sky beyond. The sunlight no longer felt like a spotlight. It felt like a reminder. A reminder that worth isn't defined by appearances. A reminder that kindness matters, even when no one is watching. The flight continued, but something had changed, not just for Armin, but for everyone on board. The pilot remained unusually quiet, his thoughts clearly occupied. The passengers who had judged so quickly now sat with the discomfort of their assumptions. Armin spent the rest of the journey focused on Meher, pointing out clouds shaped like animals, telling her stories to ease her fear. To her, none of what had happened mattered. To her, he was just her father, the man who made everything feel safe. And maybe that was enough. As the plane began its descent, Armin reflected on the journey, not just the physical one, but everything that had led him here. Loss, struggle, sacrifice. Each moment had shaped him into someone stronger, someone who understood the true value of humility. When they finally landed, passengers began to disembark, each carrying their own thoughts. Some glanced at Armin with newfound respect, others avoided eye contact altogether. The pilot stood near the exit, his expression solemn. As Armin approached, their eyes met once more. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. Some lessons don't need to be spoken. Outside the airport, the world felt open again. The sun shone brightly, casting long shadows on the pavement. Armin held Meher's hand as they stepped forward, ready to begin a new chapter. Before this story comes to a close, if it touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others. Your support helps spread messages of kindness and understanding. And here's a special request: comment below where you're watching from and share one act of kindness you've experienced or given. Let's remind the world that compassion still exists. Armin looked down at Meher, her laughter echoing softly as she pointed at something in the distance. In that moment, he realized that true wealth wasn't measured in billions, but in moments like this, simple, pure, and full of hope. And as they walked away, hand in hand, the world didn't see a billionaire. It saw a father. And that was more than enough.